what's up, guys? How we doing? So I've gotten a lot of messages on YouTube and a lot of emails about Alex Rodriguez. Obviously, there's been a lot of national attention with the playoffs about how A-Rod struggled a little bit in the playoffs, and they've taken him out of the lineup. And I've gotten a ton of emails and messages asking about his swing and what's changed and what he's doing wrong. Well, what I wanted to do, one person wanted me to look back over the years at a few of his swings, and I thought it would be pretty cool to do. I've been really busy, so I haven't had a ton of time to go over this. I just looked up this morning a couple of his swings over the years and threw them up here. So I haven't had time to break down every single swing, but I thought we could just throw it up there and see what you guys think and what you guys see, because I have a large database of thousands of swings on there, and I've got A-Rod swings throughout the year. So I wanted to throw up, this is kind of like the NFL red zone package here. We're going to go 4 squares, and what we're going to look at is, now I don't have the exact years on them because there's so many of them, it's hard to keep track of year by year. But so in the top left is when A-Rod was in Seattle. The top right is when it was a few years later when he went to Texas. The bottom left is a couple years after that. I don't know exactly what year this was. I'm going to guess it was probably about maybe 5 years ago, 4 or 5 years ago, something like that. And then the one on the bottom right is A-Rod this year. So people keep asking, what's he doing different? Well, let's just look at him, and then we can kind of look and see if we see anything. I'll point out a couple things. I just was looking over them all for a few minutes before I threw it up here. Just some quick things that I see, and I'll probably keep looking over it in the next few days. But we can throw it up there. We can go through them and see if you guys see anything different. There's a couple of real noticeable things, and then obviously there's going to be a lot of things that are tougher to see just by looking quickly. So first off, we can start off with, if you just look at his setup, one thing that I've noticed just from watching on TV is how he's gotten a little bit wider over the years. So he was really upright, feet close together in Seattle. Same thing with Texas. When he came over to New York, he got a little bit wider. And then over the last few years, especially this year, he's really, really wide. That's the first easy thing that you can see. The next big thing that I've noticed a lot is that is how much linear movement he has towards the pitcher. So back when he was younger in his Seattle days, you can see, if you put it on his head, you can see how much he moves his body towards the pitcher. So he's got a big leg kick, he loads on his backside, but then he drives off his backside a little bit, and he actually moves himself. He keeps his head in the middle of his body, but he's actually moving towards the pitcher. And he did that when he was younger. He did it in Seattle. He did it in Texas. So you can see the move he makes when he goes to hit. Again, his swing is really similar in Seattle and Texas. He's got the leg kick, goes with a pretty good-sized leg kick then, and then he actually moves himself. And obviously, once his front foot lands, now he just rotates around his head. But the idea is that he's actually moving himself and his whole body towards the pitcher. When he goes to New York, he stops doing that. So at the very beginning, he might have. I don't have a video of his first year in New York, but I have a lot of videos from over the last few years. And one thing you notice is he stops doing that. So you can see how when he got to New York, he still got a little bit of a leg kick, but he just picks up and basically puts down. And again, this is, I think, 4 to 5 years ago, somewhere in that range. But it's a pretty major difference that he did change, is that he just picks up and he puts down. And now if you look at him, this was this year, same thing. He's wide. Okay, he loads back on his backside. I'll put it on here once he lifts his foot. He picks up and he basically puts back down. So he's not really moving anywhere. And obviously, the wider you get, it's tougher to have movement because you're so wide. But still, even guys, if you see, if you're watching Albert Pujols, a guy that barely lifts his leg at all, his head will still move a little bit. He still straightens out his back leg, and he has, it's tough to explain, but he has something to hit with. He still drives a little bit off his back leg. He straightens his leg as he goes onto his toe. Maybe I'll throw one of those up here. But that's the first big thing you notice is his linear movement. He doesn't move very much at all towards the pitcher anymore. He just picks up and he puts down. The next thing I noticed is when he lands, so at landing, land, right about there, I'll put land and land. So the next thing I noticed is staying square. So coaches are always talking about staying square. Basically, your shoulder when you leg kick or when you load or whatever, and you're moving, your shoulder is going to naturally roll in a little bit. It naturally does that, so it just rolls. But the one thing I've noticed this year with A-Rod is that he has a big turn to his shoulder. So you can see, in Seattle, his shoulder. Let's go back here. In Seattle, his shoulder kind of rolls. It's tough to get a spot for it to stop at the spot I want, because back you can tell the difference in HD to the old days here up here when we didn't have that good of TVs. But his shoulder slightly rolls in. Same thing with Texas. His shoulder slightly rolled in, but he's still square. So his shoulders are basically square to the pitcher. His shoulders are basically square to the pitcher. Here, it's a little less square, so he's a little bit more turned. And now lately, his shoulders are super, super turned. So here's his back shoulder here. Here's his front shoulder. So the angle is, his hips are pretty square, but he really, really rolls his shoulder in a real lot now. And that's something that I've noticed. I've watched a lot of his videos this year. So he really rolls his shoulder in. In my experience, shoulder and direction staying square to the target, it helps you rotate better. So if you, when I get in trouble sometimes, I start to really turn my upper half. I really basically turn my shoulders like this, and it makes it harder when you're going to rotate this shoulder. A lot of young coaches, young hitting guys, like little league coaches, they talk about not moving your shoulder. But if you watch any professional hitter, when they go to rotate, that shoulder, you're not yanking with the shoulder, but the shoulder has to, when you rotate, your shoulder has to be able to move backwards to let yourself rotate and get into that position. I mean, you watch it and it always has to rotate backwards. So typically, when I really close off with my top half and my shoulder, it makes it tougher for me to rotate as well. It's almost like your shoulder kind of gets in the way of your swing. Now, I'm not saying that, that definitely gets in his way. It's just something I noticed. And I haven't watched enough of them and studied them enough to really say exactly what's going on, obviously. But that's just something I noticed. The next thing I noticed is where his weight is. So his weight distribution just in his bottom half. So the first thing is, let me try to get these back real quick before I run out of time. The first thing you'll notice is that he's squatted a lot more, especially lately. And he was more upright in Seattle and Texas, and he's gotten more squatty to where there's a lot of weight in his back leg. When he goes into his leg kick here, he's got a bend in his back knee. But as he moves towards the pitcher, you can see his back knee starts to straighten out a little bit. In New York, he stays in this squatted position a little bit more. And now this year, he really squatted into his legs. And, the more your knee's bent, you can see, but typically the more your knee is bent, the more weight is on that leg. So there's a whole lot of weight on his back leg here. There's obviously weight there. But if you look back to his younger days, his leg starts to straighten out, but when he lands, when you're starting to swing and you're starting to rotate, your weight is basically being transferred into your front side. That helps you get off of your backside and rotate easier. If you have all of your weight on your backside, it makes it tougher to rotate. You can't rotate as well because there's too much weight back there. It's kind of like an anchor almost, and you're not able to rotate. That's why if you see, it's tough to see his toe because it gets cut off. But just about every hitter, see his toe actually comes off the ground there. So right here, his toe's off the ground, it's off the ground, it's off the ground, now it's back on the ground. Off the ground there, so on his toe, off the ground, now it's back on the ground. One thing I have noticed with A-Rod in New York is that it looks like he has more weight on his backside when he begins to rotate. So the weight never really gets off of there as well as it used to when he was younger. So there's a lot of weight there. There's still a lot of weight there. There's kind of still a lot of weight there. And he doesn't rotate as well as in Seattle and Texas when the weight would be transferred better to his front side. And you can see his back foot doesn't really work the same way it used to. It kind of turns over, doesn't come off the ground like it used to. It just looks like there's more weight on his backside. If you look at it now, you can really see how much weight is back there when he's so low and squatted down. His back knee doesn't really straighten as much, and now he's rotating, but there's still a lot of weight on his backside, and it's just something I noticed, that it just looks a little tougher for him to rotate because his weight doesn't really get off of there as well as it used to when he was younger. So those are the main things that I've noticed when I watch him. Is obviously his setup's a little different, but setup doesn't really matter. Setup and your stance is personal preference. You can do whatever you want as long as you can get into a good hitting position from that setup. But the big things I noticed is his linear movement. So early on, he moved to the pitcher a little bit, keeping his head in the middle of the body. With New York, he doesn't do it as much. Staying square. He's not as square as he used to be. He used to be basically roll his shoulder in, a slight roll in, but he's still square to the target, square to the pitcher. As he's gotten older, and especially this year, he's really turned his upper half. And obviously, I don't know why that is, if he does it on purpose, if he doesn't know he does it, if it's just something. I know that when I got in trouble, I started rotating more and using more of my top half because I wasn't using my body in the best way that I could have. I had a lot of weight on my backside, and I was trying to make up for that by really over-rotating my upper body and trying to use all my upper body, and that's when my swing kind of got out of whack a lot. And then weight distribution, how much weight is on his backside and not getting off of his backside into his front leg as it was when he was younger. It's another big thing I noticed. So those are the three main things. And it just looks, when I watch his swing, it just looks like at times he gets tied up more and he doesn't rotate as well now. Obviously, he's still a great hitter. He's still, even though he struggled in the postseason, I didn't look at his regular season stats, but I don't think they were terrible. Obviously they're not up to, I'm sure, up to what he would want. He's one of the best hitters to ever live and to ever play. And, in his Seattle and Texas days, he was putting up 40, 50 home runs. When he was, his first years in New York, he was doing the same thing. And obviously this year he hasn't played as well as he wanted to. But I just think it's an interesting discussion. Obviously, anytime somebody struggles a little bit, everyone wants to know what's wrong. And, I'm not saying there's anything wrong with his swing, but it's just some things I noticed. And that's it. So let me know what you guys, if you guys notice anything, and what you guys think. And we can talk more about it. Maybe I'll throw up some more videos. Maybe I'll go a little bit more in depth and take a little bit more time to really look at it in further detail. I just wanted to start the discussion because I keep getting so many emails about it. All right, guys, take care, and we'll talk to you later.